Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. I hope that you are all well. Welcome, and if you are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today we are starting a new series called Reading All the Bookshelves, which will be like kind of a mini bookshelf tour that I will do 1 or 2 times a month. This isn't going to go exactly as I had planned, since I had hoped to have my entire library set up. Last year, as some of you already know, we moved from Ontario to Alberta, and it happened very quickly. On July 12th, I was offered a job, and we arrived in Alberta with all of our stuff on August the 8th, and that included the 6 days that we took to drive here, so very fast. One of the things that we decided to leave behind was my bookshelves, which I had had for a very long time. And the thinking was that, we would get shelving that fit the new space, which will be great when it's done. We did bring the bazillion boxes of books though. Thank goodness for our movers, because it really is a lot. In our new place, we will eventually have a library. At this point, it's still in progress. The holdup has been that I bought all of the shelving that they had, and now I am waiting for them to restock. And I'm not sure how long that's going to take. So my original plan was to do a big reveal at the beginning of the year of what the library looked like. But since we are on hold, that big reveal will have to wait. However, we can still go ahead with this series. It just won't include all of my books yet, since not all of my books have a place on a shelf. In fact, what you can't see is that most of them are still waiting in piles. But the wall behind me is complete, and it is all of the authors, the A to E authors, along with classics along the top. And I also have 3 other shelves which continue the E authors and have F, G, and some H authors with more classics. So there are 7 compartments, I'm going to call them, in each of the columns on the wall behind me, and 6 compartments across, with a total of 42 book compartments. Then with the other 3 shelves, that's 21 more compartments. So altogether right now there are 63 compartments. So what I am going to do is spin the Bookworm Adventure wheel, which has numbers 1 to 63. As I get more shelving, hopefully soon, keep your fingers crossed, I will add more numbers, and I will show you whatever shelf comes up and talk a bit about the books that are on that specific shelf. So let's give it a spin. Okay, here we go. And it's going to land on 14. Okay, so 14 is at the bottom of the second column, and we are going to take a look at this shelf. There are 18 books on this shelf, and yes, I have read some of them. This is almost like the book haul revisits. My worst fear was, what if I haven't read any? So I am going to go through these books the way they are on the shelf from left to right. So I already know these will be B authors, meaning authors with the last name beginning with B. So let's take a look at what we have on this shelf. The first book I have read, it's a poetry collection called Depression and Other Magic Tricks. And this is by Canadian writer Sabrina Benaim. The poems in this are mostly about mental illness and relationships. And I highlighted this collection last year as part of 10 Canadian poetry collections that I talked about. The next book I have also read, I don't think that I've talked about this one on my channel before. Running the Rift by Naomi Benaron. If you've watched my channel, at least for a little while, then you know that a piece of my heart is in Rwanda. And I read a lot about Rwanda, and specifically about the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. I do a series called Kwibuka Reads, where I talk about this topic more. This particular story is in many ways historical fiction because the author has clearly done her research and her homework. The fictional story is of a young man named Jean-Patrick, and he has a dream of being the first person to win an Olympic medal in track in Rwanda. And as the genocide gets closer and begins to unfold, the story follows Jean-Patrick, who is Tutsi and is now trying to survive. So the reason I call this historical fiction is because it is set in a time and place in history, and uses real facts for the story. So if you already know a lot about the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, then this story will only add to that knowledge. However, if you are just learning about it, then this book is helpful in that the information that you would be getting about the genocide are actually fact. Okay, the next two books I have read as well. They are poetry collections. Let's see where I'm going to put these books. They are by Canadian poet Gwen Benaway. One is called Holy Wild, and the other is Daybreak. And I've highlighted Gwen Benaway before, and I think I talked about her in my top poems of 2020. Gwen Benaway is an Indigenous trans woman, and so these poetry collections deal with themes about sexuality, Indigenous issues, and the poetry is very emotional. The next book is a novel that I still think about, The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Aimee Bender. I read this at least over a decade ago because I remember reading this book while I was traveling in Europe, and it was not what I was expecting at all, and I loved it. In fact, I saw that I only rated this a 4-star on Goodreads, but because of the way that this has stayed with me, I think that I should probably bump that up to a 5-star read. The story is about 9-year-old Rose, who realizes that whenever she eats anything, she can taste the emotions of the person who made the food, like whatever it is that she's eating. So this gift that she has can be a real curse. And we follow Rose as she learns how to use her gift and what that means for her family. And what I remember most about this book is actually about Rose's brother and how my heart broke for him because he has a gift too. Okay, now we are getting to some books that I haven't read yet. First is The Swans of Fifth Avenue by Melanie Benjamin. And this still really appeals to me, and I really want to read it. Many of you already know that I love New York, and I love books set in New York. And this story is a fictional story. Again, I guess it could be called historical fiction, because it's about Truman Capote's friendship with Babe Paley. The next B author is Brit Bennet. Let me just put these down. And I haven't read either of these, but I really want to. The first one is The Mothers, which is Bennett's first novel. And this novel takes place in a Southern California Black community. And it's about a 17-year-old who is dealing with her mother's suicide. And it's about the choices that she makes. There's a love triangle. And it basically asks the question of like what would have happened if different choices were to have been made. And then second is The Vanishing Half, which I believe is about twins from a Southern Black community. I know it's about sisters. And they lead very different lives. One of them passes as white, and it doesn't tell her family of her past, while the other sister has ended up in the same town where the sisters grew up. And I've heard good things about both of these books, so it would be great to get to them this year if I can. This next book is a newer book to me, and that's Pond by Claire-Louise Bennett. I talked about this book last year when I did a vlog and I took a trip to the book outlet store, and I talked about how I was influenced by AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. I don't know much about this really, other than it is a short story collection. Yes, it's a short story collection, and I believe the stories are interconnected. I could be wrong. I do like a good short story collection, so hopefully I will enjoy it when I pick it up. The next book has been sitting on my shelf for quite some time. Midnight at the Garden of Good and Evil by J.B. Berendt. Again, I've heard great things about this. It's a true crime that takes place in the early 80s in Savannah, in which someone is killed. And the question is whether or not it's murder or self-defense. And I think I have put off reading this book because I did see the movie, which was produced and directed by Clint Eastwood, which for me normally means that's a good thing and it's going to be a good movie. But in all honesty, I couldn't tell you anything about that movie other than when it ended. I remember thinking, like, what the heck was that? So that's always stuck with me, and reading the book, I think, kind of lost its appeal. Now, last year, or maybe the year before, a lot of people were reading this book for one of the prompts for the Pop Sugar reading challenge. And everyone who read it really enjoyed it, and I'm willing to give it another try. Next isn't really a book, it's a screenplay for a movie, and I have read it. Here we go. Paradise Road by Beresford. This is one of my favorite all-time movies. I also have the book that is on another shelf, so it will have to wait for another time. Since this is the screenplay, I will talk about the movie. The biggest thing is that I thought the movie deserved way more attention than it received. The story is based on real events during World War II. It's about women who are in a Japanese internment camp. The story is about how these women end up in the camp, how they survive, and about the vocal orchestra that they begin. And the story is just incredible, and I thought the movie was so well done. It has an amazing cast. It stars Glenn Close, but other people too that you would probably know. Frances McDormand, Juliana Margulies, and who else? Kate Blanchett is in it. I'm sure there's others. If you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth checking out. The next two are from author Elizabeth Berg. Elizabeth Berg has been on my radar for so long, and I am sad to say that I still have yet to read anything by her. So this first book is Night of Miracles, and I think I got this as a deal, and I couldn't pass it up, but it's the second in a trilogy. So of course I want to start at the beginning of the trilogy, and I don't have the first book, so please tell me if I'm not the only one who does that, where you buy the second one and then wait. But I've heard good things about this trilogy, so it's on my radar. And the second book by Elizabeth Berg is The Day I Ate Whatever I Wanted, and Other Small Acts of Liberation. First I thought it said libation. This is a collection of short stories about different women from different walks of life and how they find big and small ways of rebelling. The next book is one that I have read, and that is Hear the Dark by David Bergen, who is a Canadian author. This is another short story collection, and it includes one novella. I was made aware of this book because it was shortlisted for the Giller Prize in 2020, I think. I was not a huge fan of this book. I liked some of the short stories, some of them more than others. There is a dark mood to the stories in this. The novella is about a young woman who is trying to find her own voice and live by her own values. Next is Million Dollar Arm by J.B.Bernstein. This is another time where, like, I've seen the movie and have never read the book. So the book has the movie cover, which is one of my pet peeves. But this is a good story, and it's actually I guess it'd be an autobiography or a memoir of Bernstein, who created a contest in India in which two men signed pro sports contracts with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I'm guessing, since it has the movie cover, it will follow the same story, but I guess I will see if there are any differences once I get to this. Okay, so there's a few more B authors to go. Next is Parakeet by Marie-Helene Bertino. And I remember seeing this on a few booktubers channels. My apologies that I can't remember who. But I thought that the premise of this was intriguing. This is about a woman who is preparing to get married. And I think it's the week before, the big day, her dead grandmother visits her in the form of a parakeet. And if that sounds bizarre to you, well, it does to me too, but I think that's what piques my curiosity. Next up is a Canadian icon, Klondike, The Last Great Gold Rush, 1896 to 1889, I think it is, by Pierre Berton. As someone who talks about Canadian literature, I really should have read some Berton by this point. This book has been on my shelf for at least 25 years, back when I hiked the Yukon and Alaska for 6 weeks. In this nonfiction book, Berton shares stories about the many different characters who made their way to the north and to the Klondike, hoping to strike gold. And then the final book on the number 14 shelf is one I talked about not too long ago, I think in one of my hauls, and that is the Unraveling, Incest and Destruction of a Family by Donna Bissell. And this is a nonfiction account of a father who sexually assaulted his 5 daughters and the emotional and psychological effects on the family and on the women from their disclosure to persecution. So this is one that I believe I said was going to be a difficult read, but I also think it's an important one too. So those are all the books that are on shelf number 14 and were the B authors, or in this case, I think they were actually all B-E authors. All the last names that started with B-E. Part of the series is to help me read the books on my shelves, so hence the name Reading All the Bookshelves. So the plan is to put, at least one of these books, if not more, off the shelf on the 2022 TBR. So we will see if I get to 1 or 2 of them as we go. Please let me know if you have read any of the books on the shelf. What have you liked? What didn't you like? Are there any that you would recommend I read first? I'd be happy to hear your thoughts, and I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.